And we are live. Welcome to this latest episode of Totally Unscripted. I'm joined by my regular co-host. So, hello, Charles. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Martin. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Charles. And hi, Martin. Good to be here again.
Awesome.
So,
this is awesome. This is exciting. This is next week,
yeah.
and this is our next special and our next show. I hope everybody, first of all, everybody tuning in live, thanks for taking a moment away from your next programming. Awesome. Guys, have you been able to catch any of the content? What have you seen? What have you heard? What do you like? Anything catch your fancy? I know we've got an announcement here in a second we're going to show.
Yeah, well, I saw the keynotes, and I think I saw one with you and Steve and Basil on there, so that was good.
That was an interesting one. Yeah, I actually kind of liked it. Steve did a great job, and I showed up, so it was perfect. Hey, a couple of quick things just before we go. First of all, if you haven't Cloud Next, please do. Martin, if you could flash the banner up there, real easy to find. Everything is available on demand. There's also a bunch of live events as well, too. I want to point out one live event that's going to be tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, depending on where you are, 8 a.m. in the morning Pacific time. That's Pacific time here on the West Coast, California. That is super awesome. It's going to be a really neat format. So we were using called Kumo Space, where you can actually move your little cursor around a conference center and actually talk to a bunch of different product managers and folks like myself and Steve Basil and Christian Schalk, and a bunch of us will be there. So check that out. And then one final thing from next I want to step back for a second and congratulate both Martin and Steve for becoming a Google Cloud Innovator Champion. Woo! So a super new neat program where our GDEs like Steve and Martin have actually been included to become a champion. And so there's a couple levels of the program. It's super neat. The whole thing is to be really inclusive to get you more access to what's going on at Google Cloud. And so there's a lot of great benefits that are, joining sessions and getting information, including things like swag as well, too. So it's really fun stuff. It's open program for folks to join. There's a bunch of different tiers. But again, Martin and Steve, you are champions at the top tier. So congrats again for that. So with that, I think the best part of this show, without further ado, and I will stop talking here in a second, is we have a brand new API to introduce, and it was announced at Next this week, and we've got a really big bumper crew here to come talk about it. So, Martin, Steve, what do you say?
I'm ready.
I think we're going to need at least 5 minutes just to bring everyone on.
There's going to be a lot of introductions here. So this is going to be one of the biggest shows we've done, both from the fact that it's an announcement as well as we have a bunch of folks to introduce. Some you'll know, some are new. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. And why don't we do a real super quick round of introductions? I think, Chris, you're up on the top. Can we start with you and then work through?
Yeah, sure. Chris or Christian Schalk. I'm a developer advocate working primarily with Workspace and other cloud technologies and AppSheet as well. So I'm happy to have played a part in our, especially these last few months, in getting the Forms API out into the public now. So
Forms API, whoa! Wow. I just announced it. Awesome.
That's right.
So who do you have with us? Charles. And by the way, you're going to notice we've got a bunch of Charleses at today's show. Not intentional, but fun nonetheless. Charles.
Yeah, hi guys. So I'm Charles from Zzish. I actually used to work for Google. I was actually Google's first product manager hired outside the United States back in 2005, which is my main claim to fame. But hopefully I'll be famous one day for starting Zzish, which is an education technology company that has a product called Quizalize that sort of competes in the space alongside companies like Kahoot. And we're really excited about the new Google Forms API.
Awesome. The other Charles, Charlie Kemp.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. My name's Charlie Kemp. I'm a strategic alliances manager at Zapier. I also actually used to work at Google way back when, but now manage our partnerships with some of our bigger partners. And Google Workspace is one of the most popular ecosystems of apps that people are connecting Zapier to. So excited to be here and chat about how we're thinking about the new Forms API.
Awesome.
I'm Hannah. Thanks for having me here. I currently work at Google and I have worked on the API that we're announcing, and I'm here to answer questions about it from that perspective.
Awesome. So thanks for A, joining us, but B, more importantly, thanks for helping build this and make this a possibility. With that, we've got a ton of questions coming in, and we'll get to those shortly. But Christian, why don't you kick off a little bit more about what we're offering?
Sure. Yeah. So I do have some, just a few slides that I have prepared. And so, but then again, this is conversational, and it's just a few slides. So if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. So let me know when you have my screen showing, and I can kind of walk through a few things. Okay. Awesome. So as you may have noticed, yesterday we had our announcement for the Google Forms API. So essentially, it's now open. So there's no longer NDA. It's fully out in the open. There is a new dev site. We have a new developers website with some code examples and basically just enough information for you to get started. What is Forms API in a nutshell? It basically provides full programmatic access for managing forms. So everyone's familiar with forms, but now you have a full API where you can manage, create them, do a whole bunch of really powerful integrations on top of forms. Some key powers that the Google Forms API provides is it's really all about automation. So you can automatically create forms on the fly based off of different data inputs. You can also essentially tap into other existing systems, whether they question banks or essentially data backends. Another very powerful feature with the Forms API that it enables is that it allows you to build automations that can have real-time data coming into it. So if you have incoming responses, you could build a dashboard that might show any type of data. For example, I've spoken with Charles at Zzish about how they might build this dashboard showing like people or students filling out quizzes and tests and stuff, and you can see like an online, like a real-time data a visualization of that. Another key point is that when you have this like high degree of connectivity to the actual working form, you can take some important cues, such as like trigger a business workflow based off of what kind of data inputs are being provided. And that actually takes advantage of a really cool functionality that I believe Hannah was largely responsible for on our team, which is essentially a cloud PubSub-based push notification system that enables some very advanced integrations. Okay. And as you may guess, we have some fairly obvious use cases. So the educational space is very important for them to be able to allow their educators to tap into large databases of question banks. So that's really kind of like one of the big value adds. And of course, as I mentioned, like a real-time dashboard. Customer management support is another very popular and very pragmatic way to start to kind of ramp up your forms usage so that you can like take actions based off incoming data from various customers as they're filling out surveys and responses and stuff like that. And of course, the main thing here is that it's not just forms anymore. It becomes like a much more sophisticated visualization engine that you can then tap into all of the data inputs from the form inputs as well as the actual live responses as they're coming in real time. So some pretty cool use cases all in all. I won't go into all of the API functionality, but we can always address this as needed. So you have the API functionality is like forms, schema, meta update. You can update forms, quizzes. You can add questions. You can also read the form metadata. So you can actually see what are all the different items and elements inside of the forms themselves. And then, of course, you get over to the responses. You can fetch all the responses, do whatever analysis you need or any kind of visualizations. And then, of course, finally was the push notifications, meaning that you can take advantage of any new incoming forms responses and then put them into some kind of cool studio. Likewise, if a change occurs on a form, you can also get a notification saying that, hey, this form has a new field, so you might want to take action on that. So anyway, just at a high level of what the API provides. Also, just really quickly, before moving on to more Q&A, is go ahead.
Chris, I have a question for you real quickly. So obviously, we've had an app script service for a while that allowed you to
good point.
Programmatic access. What's the big difference, or what was the impetus for doing the API itself? Like, what are the changes we should expect? What are some of the advantages, or what are some of the new things that may be different from what we could do in the past?
Well, it's interesting. I just mentioned the Cloud PubSub notification system, and feel free to jump in, Hannah. But that is one kind of differentiation at the moment. They are kind of somewhat parallel. Now, I don't know if you fully clarified. AppScript has had the ability to programmatically build out forms purely from an AppScript perspective, and that was implemented a while ago. This is, in some regards, kind of like the same thing, but it provides the same type of access to the whole rest of the world. And I mean rest in the sense that it's a restful API. Yeah, exactly. Just the pun kind of happened. But so what that enables is that really anyone with, just straight JavaScript, Python, PHP, Java, whatever, with all the respective client libraries, or even if they write their own access, code, they can access the API directly. So it's just providing a lot more capability in the overall software engineering world. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Hannah.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, AppScript provides some of the same functionality, but it's within AppScript. So I think that's appropriate for building like Forms add-ons, which live in the Forms UI. But if you're building an integration, you want to use a different language and you want the entry point to be outside of the Forms UI. I think that this new API would be appropriate for that.
Yeah, and if I can just add, I mean, I've used both the AppScripts API and the new REST API. And for anybody who's listening who's used the old AppScripts API, they may be well aware of some of the limitations around reading and writing images. So, I've been working with, Christian, Hannah and their team to make sure those limitations aren't there in the REST API. So you have full ability to read and write images to both questions and answers, which is quite important.
Yes, we did encounter the image thing, but it actually was very helpful for us on the API as well. So thank you, Charles.
So I think good timing. I'd love to hear from the partners, either the other Charleses. What are some of the use cases you've already kind of played with, or what do you think the sweet spot is for the API based upon the way you and your organizations are working with Forms today?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about Zapier and how we leverage Forms today and how we're planning to leverage a new API. And I think if there's a link that we can pop up at some point to our existing integrations page. And if you aren't familiar with Zapier, we essentially enable non-technical users to connect one app to 4,000 other apps that are within kind of the Zapier ecosystem. And so the way that works is that either a developer or Zapier ourselves will build an integration with a given API. So in this case, the Forms API, and allow trigger a workflow. So say you want to pass data from a Google Form entry into a Trello card that then starts a work stream for another team that you work with. Or maybe you want to generate a message in Slack that contains the information that came in from a recently submitted form. Any of those are possible with Zapier. And so what we try to do is deliver that data reliably and quickly. And prior to the Forms API, the way to do that was actually to leverage a combination of the Drive API and the Google Sheets API to actually pull those responses in. And so we have an active Google Forms integration that you'll see here, but we're mostly looking forward to using the new purpose-built Google Forms API to be able to more quickly and reliably pass data from form submissions for the thousands of Zapier users who are leveraging Google Forms today, and help them get that data into other applications and jumpstart kind of automated workflows.
That's awesome. And other Charles, anything to add specifically that you've seen?
Yeah, well, I mean, to us, it's super exciting. I mean, I guess people don't usually get excited about a new REST API, but for us, we think it's quite transformational, to be honest. We think of it a little bit different way to Zapier, but the first thing that we're doing is to smooth out that ability to transport your quizzes as a teacher between multiple platforms. At the moment, you've got dozens of different quiz platforms out there, and there's no interoperability, right? So, you create your quiz in Kahoot or you create it in Quizlise and you're kind of stuck there. And so the first thing we're doing is we're going to make it very, very, we're trying to make it very portable. We're starting with Google Forms and Quizlise quizzes, but we really want to try and make it very easy to create a quiz once and use it anywhere, right? As a teacher. And then the second thing that the way you can think about this API is, when I was starting my company, we had to build our own quiz engine because there was no third-party quiz engine you could programmatically use. But if I were starting my company today, maybe I wouldn't even build my own quiz engine. I just go, okay, now that there's this great API for Google Forms, I can use Google Forms as my quiz engine for whatever I want to build, right? And that is kind of transformational, isn't it, if you think about it? And then I think probably the third way to think about it is, well, if you want, if you look at LMSs in general, like Google Classroom, most LMSs now have a quiz engine, right? Actually, they didn't 5 or 6 years ago, but most do now, if not all do now. But those quiz engines tend to be very basic, and arguably Google Forms, Google Quizzes is a very basic quiz engine. But now you have the flexibility to really enhance that in any way you feel fit. So we should be seeing, over the next year or two, all sorts of wonderful enhancements to Google Forms and Google Quizzes for teachers in the classroom. We're looking at all sorts of interesting things. I don't want to give too much away, but it really is, I think, a transformational API.
So that's a good segment, a good segue to one of our questions here, and I may botch the name. I apologize. Adam, sorry. But if you can put that up there, is it going to work for every Google account or just Google Workspace? In other words, will it work across consumer scenarios and all SKUs? Where can we find this?
Yes, it does work for every Google account. I don't know if you have any further context to Hannah on that one.
No, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Perfect. So it goes everywhere.
I suppose the follow-up. So, Christian, you say it's the public beta announcement. Where can people get access? So we've heard.
Yeah, I have it in my deck as well. I have some short links later that I have. Kind of like the main call to action is essentially a sign-up page, or it's a form application that's in a Google form. And you basically go through it and answer a few questions, and then you provide your cloud project. So essentially you have your Google Cloud project, and then you also provide, as long as you provide your Google accounts and such, we can then turn that over and then get you allow listed so that you can enable the Forms API. And this is in our current mode right now, as we're currently in restricted mode, and we're going to, and even when we open up the beta, we still will have the allow listing process. Next year, when we go to GA, we'll actually have that all open, so anyone can just turn on the API. But that's basically it.
Sorry. Martin, can you just repost that link for a second? Hey, Chris, is the program open to everybody? Is anybody who signs up allowed to be part of the early?
It's a bit of an application. There is another additional, it's called a PAPA agreement. So essentially it goes through, it's like a workspace. I think the form is a little bit old, it even reverts to G Suite. But basically, if you follow through the forms, there shouldn't really be any issue. Basically, you just need a Google Cloud project and you need a Google account that we can then turn on all the switches on the back end such that you'll be able to make requests to the Forms API.
Awesome. Perfect. So there's the link. And just remember, obviously, link shortener, normally it's case sensitive. So you got to put the capitals in there. So that's awesome. So everybody can sign up for that immediately. And not to hold you and Hannah to it, when do you expect GA, ballpark?
So I had my roadmap slide, but yeah. So right now, I don't know if you want to show it. Let's see. Here we go.
You show it. We put you up.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put it back on the.
Yeah, but again, not to commit the team to any specifics, but when can they maybe look forward to this?
So the GA is expected in drum roll. No, the GA is expected. I'll get my other.
Question is, how long is the drum roll going to be?
It's a long drum. Sorry, I'm fumbling around here. There we go.
I can see Christian's slides.
If you can see my slide now, we have the roadmap, right? So right here in October, we had our public beta announcement.
Or yesterday.
So we just did that yesterday, and then we're looking at latter in this year. I won't nail the exact date, but basically what we have today is what we're going to then switch over to an open beta. But essentially it's the same technology, no new features, nothing. It's just basically continuing on addressing any feedback and bugs and so forth. And then we move forward into the next year, looking at the first half of next year for our actual GA launch. And that's essentially, again, the same API, same technology, only with if there's any necessary fixes that comes up as part of the beta program. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Hannah?
Yeah, I can. So yeah, a stable API like that is not going to be changed any backwards and compatible way. So it's very important to us to make sure that we incorporate feedback before we hit GA, which is why we have this pre-GA phase. So I want to emphasize, if folks are thinking about joining this early access program, please give us feedback. Your input is extremely important to us. I know we've worked with Charlie and Charles already, and their feedback has been incredibly valuable in shaping the direction that we take with this API. yeah, I think with like a developer community, there's this like unique chance to interface with the people that we're impacting on a more direct basis, and that's important to us.
Got a couple great questions in the queue from Arco. Arco asks, can we also reach the draft responses with the new Forms API?
Unfortunately, this is not possible. But like I just said about feedback, we want to hear what you want. So if you want to join the early access program, get into our issue tracker and let us know what it is you're looking for, things like
Arco
that.
has some feedback that he'd like to reach the draft responses.
Nice. Well, we have a public issue tracker as well. So once you're into our program, you get through all the stuff that you get with a typical early access program, issue tracker access in the forum and such. So yeah.
Here's a somewhat related question, again from Armandov. Will there be an API for submitting the form?
So this is not currently allowed by the API. If this is something you're interested in, again, go to the issue tracker. But right now it's not there. Yeah.
Cool.
When it comes to add-ons, let's go big picture first. So we have editor add-ons, GWAO type of add-ons, and Google announced runtime with other languages to create these add-ons. But when it comes to the Forms add-on, that's not true with this new API, right? You still have to use AppScript to create the add-on in Forms.
Yeah, I think if you want to create an add-on, that's through AppScript. But like we talked about before, maybe this new API is appropriate if that's not the entry point that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. Although you could, I think we have some examples of how to use this new API from AppScript if you still do want to have an add-on, but you want some of the additional functionality, the more powerful stuff that you get from the new API.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hey, Chris, is pictures worth 1,000 words. Do you have something you can show us? I know you've been working on some samples.
Yeah, since we're talking about actual usage, I think this will help clarify things.
See it in action and give us a great use case.
I'm sorry, what?
So give us a great use case. Show us something you've built.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to start with basics as opposed to the full end. But yeah, we can get to some more advanced stuff as well. First off, a couple things I'm going to show you. It's basically a RESTful API. So you can actually go through the process and set yourself up to make direct RESTful calls, even with a browser. And then I'm going to switch over and show AppScript. So since we have a fairly large AppScript audience in this crowd, I wanted to kind of make sure that we can show you how to do AppScript using REST only, not necessarily the actual Forms service in AppScript, but the actual direct REST call to the Forms API. And then I'll just show you some more advanced integrations that can be done using like a typical programming language, and I'll show a Python example very quickly. So yeah, I can just jump into that really quickly. And then I have some more advanced integrations, which will then be like essentially your traditional web application that I can show you as well. All right, so these are essentially what you do once you're allow listed for the beta. You enable the Forms API, and one of the first things I tend to do is just tell people to do a ping on the API to make sure you're pinging the API. You have your API key set up, and this lets you know that you're actually good to go. So this is kind of like a good first step as you're getting used to or getting started with the API. You can then go and say, I want to generate an OAuth access token, and you could literally put that inside the body of a curl, so like a command line to actually create a new form or whatever. You can do all that stuff via command line. Now, the next thing you want to do or consider is essentially doing like some coding, or actually, let me just jump to an AppScript stuff here, which is kind of fun. So since our audience is fairly familiar with AppScript, I would assume, this is pretty much the essential little bit of AppScript code that you could use to talk to the Forms API. Now, I'm not really doing anything fancy here other than I am grabbing an OAuth token here, and I'm constructing essentially a call with a URL fetch call where I provide a set of options, which provides essentially what method of the API that we're using. And most importantly, I'm providing an OAuth token. So just to see this in action, I'm actually calling a specific form here. And I'm getting, let me pull up this window just a second. There we go. And that's the response from the Forms API. So pretty basic stuff. So that's definitely one of our guides that we published yesterday. So you can actually write this code and in a matter of moments be up and running. Oh, I should also point out that in order for the OAuth token to be properly scoped, and your app script code to be able to make an external request, you do set up this Oauth Scopes section in your appscript.json. And then that's kind of the magic that allows you to do this fun stuff with the Forms API in just pure basic app script. All right. The other stuff I was going to show was if you wanted to build a actual web app in AppScript, which comes with its own cautionary advices, because building a web app in AppScript can sometimes be a little bit more work than you might be looking to get into. But this is straight old-fashioned HTML. But one of the things that I've done is just to kind of make this a working solution is I've actually created a set of RESTful calls that mirror the API. And so this is kind of like an experimental project that I've been playing with. And so just to kind of give you a sneak preview of what's possible, here's like a web app version of that. So that's actually here's the running version of that app. We're going to go through and get like a fresh OAuth token. I can authorize it. And I just step through that. Yada, yada. Click allow. And that should be, let me make sure that everything is good. Yep, I'm good. So in this point, what I've done is I kind of set up like some initial test methods against the API. So if I wanted to get an actual set of responses or just the actual form itself. Oh, that was not the one I wanted. Let me do this one here. That's the one I wanted. I want to get essentially what is the metadata from the form. So I dump that down into like this status report here. So that's just basically doing what we refer to on the Forms API as a get. Likewise, I can do a list of the responses here. And again, this is just using the same type of code that I showed you before in AppScript, where I send up a RESTful call with the OAuth token, and then I actually specify the method, and then I get the response back. So that's pretty much it for the basic stuff. Did you have
Chris, you knew this question was going to come up.
Yep.
A couple folks already asked. Edie, one of them. How do they access your samples? Where can they find this?
So that's a good question. So the current set of samples is available. I'll just pull up the website right here. So this is new as we switch over. So we have essentially a new developer website. So this was launched yesterday. So actually, I'll just click on the home button. And we have the links in the presentation as well. But basically, this is all fairly fresh, new content. Again, you can see here, restricted beta. You can sign up for the early adopter program. We also have a set of new guides. And these guides explain how to do a variety of things. So for example, how to create a form. And as you can see here, this is like the actual REST part of the body that you send upstream to the API. Or if you want to use, like, say, a typical language like Python, this is actually using a bit of code to go out and make a call to the API. So all these are now hosted, and they're embedded in the actual dev site as well as on GitHub. So you can access these directly on GitHub today. So I definitely recommend having a look, try these out. Let us know if you have any questions along the way. And as we lead up to our open beta announcement later in the quarter, we're going to continue to augment these different examples with more. We want to move past obviously just Python. We want to throw in some things like Node and just straight JavaScript and such. I think one other demo I was going to show, but whatever works is fine. I was just going to show like a basic Python. Like I think one of these examples here, I just have it running if you're curious.
Maybe we come back to that, Christian. We've got just a question from Dennis. I think, Hannah, this might be one. So you can answer. So are there any major differences between the AppScript APIs and the REST API?
Yeah, so I would love to elaborate on this. Like we mentioned before, there's some differences in like supported languages and like what kind of entry point you would want to use. And there's also, instead of like AppScript triggers, we can push events to Cloud PubSub, which is you can integrate with like a bunch of different Google Cloud Platform things. It's like generally more scalable and powerful than AppScript triggers. And then Charles mentioned like some functionality that we have in this new API that isn't in AppScript. Things like dealing with images in forms. There's some answer key stuff that's not possible in AppScript, like answer keys for short answer questions. Let me just see what else. The option to shuffle multiple choice options, the ability to fetch like the metadata of a file upload question, So I would definitely recommend that you go and like poke around if there's something that you are missing from AppScript that might be in our new API. And if it's not, you can definitely file in the issue tracker for it.
Yeah, let me compound on that question a little bit. Would your recommendation, especially folks out there that are already doing forms-based development with AppScript, would your recommendation be to lean heavily on the APIs going forward? I hate to ask it this way, but would you recommend it over using AppScript, more performance, features, function? And is it probably more advantageous to start focusing on that if you're doing forms-based work?
Yeah, I think you should think carefully about your use case. Like if your idea is like quickly automate something that you're doing, but you're not planning to like share that integration with a ton of people, then AppScript still might be your best bet. But if you're trying to build something that can scale, something that needs that extra power from the Forms API, I would definitely look towards that.
Good answer.
I think Charles Zzish might also have some context there as well. Since
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the case that the REST API is more fully formed. I mean, the AppScript API did have a few rough edges. So this is, I would say unless you've got a good reason to use the AppScript API, use the REST API going forwards. There might be some cases where you want to use the AppScript API. Yeah. Of course, if you want to do a Google Forms add-on, then you're going to want to do some AppScript. But I mean, as Christian's just demonstrated, even if you're doing it as a Google Forms add-on in AppScript, you can still leverage the REST API, which is probably the thing you should do. But of course, the great thing it really enables is that you can write, if you're using AppScript, the sort of HTML you can write and things you can do is fairly limited. You don't have the ability to do a full React UI in AppScript, but you can now build your entire, your own product with your own UI with whichever technologies you want, and now just hook into that REST API for the things you need. So far more flexible, far more powerful, more fully featured. So unless you've got a good reason to use the AppScript API, use the REST API is my advice.
So on this topic as well, not to put Hannah on the spot, but we've been doing kind of some analysis, and we're hoping to put out some further guidance between kind of the delta between AppScript, the form service, as well as what we provide with the API. Did you have any comments on that, Hannah?
I mean, we can say whatever we want. I'm really grateful, Charles, for your comments and to have you here, because I think as the folks building the API, we can guess at how it will be used, but it's nice to hear from you like that this has tangible benefit for you. So yeah, we can definitely like list out like what the differences are, but I think knowing which of those matter to people, like that's that's on you. Yeah.
So Christian, I think I interrupted your demo. Do you want to share some of the Python stuff?
Just maybe for further context, if you want to see, I'll switch over to like, here's just my terminal screen. Let me know if you see it. And so if you could see my screen, this is a kind of a working version of the code that I was just showing you in the developer guide. And so as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going ahead and making a call. Here's like a discovery doc URL, and it goes through and makes the call directly in the API right there. So essentially, this is to essentially go through the creation. It does a creation, but then it also does an update. And so in this case, it's actually doing an update to an existing form here. So just to kind of show this in action. Funny, I have this. There we go. There we go. So at the bottom of the screen, I have Python up. So I'm just running Python, the actual code itself. And what that does is that turns on the authentication.
You got a few accounts there, Chris.
Yeah, that happens.
I think it's the most I've ever seen.
Well, I'm the winner there. So anyway, the bottom line is the code executed, and it basically gives you like a response, that it was successfully executed. So essentially, in this case, it updated some of the metadata. So that not too flashy, but just to kind of show you the basics of how to interact with the API using like a typical language like Python. And of course, we'll go through and add more examples in our developer's guide as time progresses. So yeah, that's basically it.
So in terms of client libraries, is it the usual suite of Google client libraries?
Basically, yeah. We have the Workspace client library package that will be essentially enables for Forms API. We have the current. I don't know if you want to touch on this further, Hannah, but basically we have kind of like the Forms API client libraries for the various languages. So like we have obviously like Java, PHP, Go, and so forth. Python, you don't even need the client library, but in general, yeah, we provide the client libraries in our developer package for the early adopters, and then later on, once it's GA, it becomes essentially the standard Google Workspace client libraries that you can just update your environment as needed.
Yeah, in the early access program or early adopter program, we're asking, we're providing a few of those, and then like it's on request basically if there's one that you want, and then once we go GA, they'll all just be available.
Yep. Cool. That's it for me. I didn't have anything other on slides. If you wanted to go through, other than we got our
I love to
links that we want to share, and then I think we're mostly good there.
I'd love to explore a couple of more use cases. I think they'd just be interesting to hear. But we also have a couple of questions, and I want to ask you this one wrapped around a question. So Arco has a question. Are there also plans for more options to embed questions from forms instead of embedding an iframe with a whole other form in other pages or apps? I was going to ask this question on top of that. Do you find that developers are asking questions that require features? And what are some of the things people are asking you that are challenging, or something that may actually change the forms product at all? Have you heard any feedback so far? And you've had a closed beta, so it's not everybody. But is there anything that you found that is driving some product changes from the API kind of standpoint? I know you're both smiling, so that either there is or...
I'm not sure what we can really speak to here, but just know that your feedback is valuable to us. I don't know.
That's very well loaded. It's a very well loaded invitation to continue to ask for things.
Yeah, I think Charles Zzish kind of spilled the bag there, or spilled the beans, I guess, with regards to better image support, which actually improved the product. So we're definitely indebted to him on that. So.
I think it's kind of neat because a lot of times developers actually can drive the innovations back to the product. And, personally myself working with the AppScript version of Forms, there's a few things I'm like, oh, wow, I wish the product did this because my solution would be more interestingly complete. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what those use cases are. Martin, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I was, so in terms of getting feedback, obviously the it's a early access beta. So are there other ways that people can get in touch with you if they've got comments or suggestions about the Forms API?
In one of my slides, I have essentially contact the Forms API team. It's an email address. Yeah, exactly. That's probably the easiest way right now for if anyone wants to contact the team directly. Like we have questions occasionally coming in from various folks that are just interested on learning how to take those first steps. And then, yeah, we help them along.
Yeah. When it comes to responses, I'm going back in time in my brain. I think originally we only had spreadsheet service that could do responses, then Forms services. Well, we can do it too. With the Forms API, I guess we were tending to forget about the on-submit type of stuff with spreadsheets for responses, right? We're focusing more on the responses within the form, right?
Yeah, I think that also taps into what we offer with regards to the push notification capability. So you can do that.
Yeah, it's obviously a different mindset from what it was in the past, is my point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you want like that time of the submission, there is the notification system that's part of the API. Obviously, you can also fetch responses at any point and compare from a previous fetch and so forth. But yeah, there's different ways to do it. But it's not kind of the classical on form submit type of an HTTP model, I guess, in this sense.
And I think you're also resolving a pain point when you mentioned one use case where if a new form field was added, well, sometimes when that happens down the line, it could mess up something else. And if you can be listening for that, it seems like it could solve pain points. Is that right?
Yeah, that's also part of the API, being able to notice when the actual structure of the form changes, and that can fire alert that you can watch for specifically. So yeah.
Very good.
So one of our previous guests I think it was Spencer, he talked about on change in spreadsheets, he basically added functionality. So if someone changed a cell that they shouldn't, it just automatically turned it back. Is that is that something? If someone changes a form and they shouldn't have changed the form, could you just trigger something to change it back by the API?
Probably in some cases. I know there's some things that you can't do. You can't edit file upload questions via the API, but as long as that's not what they changed.
But it's interesting. I think actually Google Forms, unlike a lot of the Workspace products, doesn't have a history function, does it? So, but somebody could now build an add-on which essentially adds a history function, or the ability to save versions of your Google Form, so that if you did edit it and change it, and you suddenly said, "Oh, I want to go back to that version that I'd saved 2 months ago," you could do it. I mean, it doesn't, that feature doesn't exist in Google Forms, but this new API would allow somebody to implement it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about, more about use cases as well too. So I know, again, we're super early days, right? You're just announcing this broadly to a bigger audience, but I know you've had some private beta developers, like our guests, actually talking about it. Are there scenarios that you've heard people brought up that just simply weren't impossible? It just weren't possible before, now that the API exists? Are there? You mentioned, notifications and pub sub and things like that. Have you heard new killer use cases where you expect people to do more things with forms simply and to do more with it? Is there anything kind of popped up yet?
I think Chris has been more in touch with our developer community than I have. Maybe he wants to.
Yeah. I mean, in general, the things that I've noticed is that once people start and they actually go through the process of working with the API, they already have a pretty good frame of reference. Charlie at Zapier had some good feedback along the way, and we've been in discussions of their integration, and they brought up some good points of various things along the way. I won't get into the specifics on those, but I think in general, yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing process, as with any kind of early developer, program, where we're engaging with them and getting their feedback, and that's really, I think, the value proposition that we're putting forward. Is if you join us early, you can essentially help the API continue to evolve and get better, and we're definitely looking for that kind of impact from our users out there. So
I think there are some killer use cases it enables, but I'm going to keep quiet about them for now. You're just going to have to stay tuned and see what happens.
That's right. I can understand.
That's exactly it. I expect some really good product plans.
Well,
I listed the general use cases. They're pretty cool. Educational, customer management.
Again, my inclination is I think people will actually look closer at forms for building applications. I've said in many of my presentations in the past, hey, look, it's a great tool for gathering information and routing it through a spreadsheet and doing something with it. But as you all know, that's limited in scale and limited in scope. And this will actually allow you to do that on an industrial level, where before you're responding to triggered events in a spreadsheet, which is not necessarily, the right way to gather thousands of, records. And
industrial level. I like that, because that's really what we're talking about, being able to.
That's why I was curious. I mean, and again, it's early. It'd be great to get feedback from folks listening in or revisit this topic, closer to your GA date. But I think a lot more people will look a lot more seriously at using one of the most popular, input tools in the world, which is Google Forms. And so it'll be interesting to hear how it scopes out. And I'd love for other people to kind of chime in and let us know what they're thinking or what they want to explore. And Charles, we'll look forward to yours when you launch that. Do let us know.
Well, I think half our audience are off doing forms history, version history.
Yeah, he already gave that. Yeah.
You'll see a whole load of plugins launched tomorrow doing that, won't you? It's a great feature.
Hey, Charlie, let's talk about Zaps. With this new API, do you see, or have you created a new Zap that didn't exist because of the API? Or is it some of it where you redone the behind the scenes and people like me don't realize the hard work you went and made it better? Just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll preface by saying we're in early days of kind of this new version of our forms integration. And it's funny because we have, if you'll see on the site, we have a forms integration. It's been running for years. We have thousands and thousands of happy users. And so this isn't something that we're creating that new. The initial gains that we're going to have are more performative stuff. Everyone's talked about scale. And so we need to be able to deliver very, very fast workflow automations for thousands and thousands of users. And we need to keep an eye on tens and hundreds of thousands of forms at any given moment. And so the ability to do that and our ability to do that has been strained under the pre-Forms API world, where we're relying on things like polling a drive endpoint, like for every single Zap. And a Zap in our terminology is any time that there's an A to B kind of automation that's one of our users has set up. And so anytime someone does that for a Google form today, we're keeping an eye on a spreadsheet basically through the Google Drive API. And as you can imagine, that gets out of hand and starts to hit rate limits and stuff like that. And we have to call Google and be like, hey, help us make sure we can keep this service reliable and performative for our users. So a lot of the stuff in the short term is going to be gains on speed. We can deliver those form responses faster, which may unlock a lot more use cases for our users. And so from our perspective, we try to enable Zapier users to be incredibly creative through our kind of editor tools. And so the more speed and reliability that we can deliver within that experience, the more creative that they can be, where maybe something that might take 2 minutes to trigger something within another SaaS app that they're using can now be done in 30 seconds. We may not know what that might unlock, but the assumption is that that will actually provide potential uses that previously someone may not have pursued. And so I think in the short term, we're focused on getting that stuff right. And then in the long term, there's some additional things within either reading more metadata coming through forms that may not have existed as rows on a spreadsheet or as columns on a spreadsheet that we were keeping an eye on. And then the ability to actually edit and create forms as an action. At Zapier, we think of automations as triggers, which is like when something happens, do this, and actions, which is the this. And so most form use cases are around triggers right now. Like when something gets submitted through form, we'll do something else. There's a world where we could also take information from other SaaS apps and actually create forms with them or do things that are now possible through some of the right possibilities within the Google Forms API. So can't commit to anything other than making our existing functionality better. But I think we're keeping an eye on it, and Google Forms is one of our most popular and flexible use cases today. And so we expect that to continue to accelerate and hopefully deliver a better experience.
So with all that nice performance, I can see where forms, collection, metadata, and zap it right over to a slide deck for a sales guy, right?
Yeah, you can think of putting stuff into a CRM. A rudimentary use case would be if you have your website and you're collecting information from your website, who needs to get that and how fast do they need to get that, and what do they need to do with it as a manual person, or what can another application do with it where it's just completely taken care of. And so we focus on at Zapier is automating manual tasks for businesses that don't have a technical engineer. And this audience that we're talking to now is capable of using AppScript and using this API. A lot of our users aren't. And so we basically give them the same kind of tools and abilities to do a lot of the functionality that this API will enable without having to actually code anything. So that's kind of what's exciting for us.
That is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that with this new PubSub feature and the API, like we focused a lot on performance and scalability and reliability, as well as having like an interface that's not like rows in a sheet, that's easier to work with programmatically. And we're really excited about the ways that this is going to connect like people who use forms for its ease and people who use other tools for the power that they offer and additional functionality.
I agree. I look forward to that. So I've written 1,000 apps that are, take the on submit and do something, or trigger off the sheet and do something, and does something very little. So it'll be cool what people can build. Anyway, I think we're getting pretty close to our end. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for tuning in live and asking those great questions. I definitely want to thank our partners for helping us really understand how to do this. But of course, definitely want to thank our team, Hannah and Christian, who's talking a lot about it. Thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing. Look forward to the program. Martin, if you could put the link up just one more time on how folks can actually become a part of this, that would be super awesome. And we look forward to you joining us, giving these folks some feedback. Join the program, and let's make this great. And also, we would love to hear, put them in the comments below in the vid. What are you building? What do you think about building? What do you want to do with this? I think it would be awesome. So with that, for me, I'm going to say thanks and goodbye. Martin, Steve?
Before we go, just a reminder as well, it's Google Cloud Next. If you are on Twitter, and you're kind of losing track of what's happening, there's the Google Workspace devs Twitter account. So they've been posting regularly about Google Next, and they've been boosting your little session, Charles. So
They did.
So I highly recommend that. And also thanks for all of you contributing in the chat today for the show. It's been great to have your questions and feedback for our guests. So thanks very much for joining us. Charles, do we want to say anything about our next show?
We do. I was super excited to have today's show because obviously we're launching this great API. I'm also excited about next week's show because it's going to be unique for anybody who has been around AppScript for any period of time. We have a special guest revisiting the community. His name is Eric Kolita. Eric Kolita is one of the longtime, most well-known community advocates for Google AppScript. He's no longer with Google, but he's going to join us and talk about life after AppScript. So talk about a little bit why he still works with AppScript and plays with it and does things with it. He's actually still active in the community, but he also has moved to a new role with a new company. Pardon my dog in the background there. Moved to a new role in a new company called Coda. And Coda has a really interesting product, and he's now helping their developer relations get off the ground. So we look forward to having and welcoming with open arms Eric back to talk about life after AppScript.
And slightly different, it's Tuesday, not Wednesday. We just like to mess with your heads.
Next
Same
Tuesday.
time
Yes.
Same time next Tuesday.
Yeah. And as always, you'll find recordings on our YouTube channel. They'll also go out as podcasts as well. There was a lot of resources shared in today's show, so we'll post all the links to those as well on the tu.appscript info website, so you can find those once I get around to that bit. Again, thank you all for joining our show, and happy scripting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Definitely a pleasure. It's been fun.